So I think if you told me a couple years ago that we get a sequel to Rage, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, 2019. Rage comes out in like a month, less than a month now, I think. Alessandro, you and I got to play a couple hours of basically the full game. There were still kinks they were working out, but it was essentially the complete game. But yeah, I mean, like, what were your first impressions when we walked in and played it?
Yeah, well, this was actually my third time playing the game. I actually played, I'm pretty sure the same demo you did. It was just like set in like a, just like a building, and you go through a tutorial, then you would go through like a very standard combat encounter. And I'm gonna be honest, I really wasn't that impressed, considering like they made such a big deal of trying to bring Rage back, because the original game, I guess, was something that, there was a lot of hype around it. Like, this was the first id Software open world game, and they were trying to, very much like bring that sort of like heavy action from like, from Doom or, like any of their previous shooters into like a broader open world. But I feel like it just didn't really work, and it seemed like everyone forgot about it. But now it's back, and we got to play like, a very substantial amount of the game, I guess. Like, what, 2.5 hours, I think? Or?
Yeah, that's 2.5 to 3 hours or so. And they basically let us go wherever we want. They ran us through a light tutorial, and then they dropped us in an area, and they're like, you can pretty much go wherever you want. And they load us into a late save where you can kind of see all the experimentation and combat that you get, which I thought was really neat. But when you saw Rage, it was like kind of like what Alessandro was describing. It was very linear and like not.
So yeah, it was basically a tutorial, intro to combat, and then a horde mode, and then just a brief like race that we could try, which was about an hour and a half, I want to say. So I kind of came away with what Alessandro just expressed, like that's it. There's no more to it, and I was a little disappointed and a little worried about what the game was going to be. But both of you seem to have much more positive impressions of the game now, having played a later version of it.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen much of Rage 2 other than like some of the previews and whatnot. But yeah, I had fun. It definitely seems like a playground. The combat, like people have said, is a lot like Doom, but more expanded, a little more. It fits that open space a bit more. There's a little bit more mobility. Some interesting powers you can get, like the ground pound in particular was pretty fun, because that would like nullify any falling damage. So if you jumped off a high area, you'd take a lot of damage. But if you did that ground pound, you'd stop that.
You basically feel like a superhero playing this game.
Pretty much.
The powers that you have. Yeah.
And like that's one thing we noticed. There was so many skill trees in that game. Like it was almost overwhelming with how many skill trees there were. Not that that's a bad thing. It seems like there's a lot of customization.
Like each weapon has like several like different upgrades you can acquire. Like some that like actually hit through multiple enemies. Like like increasing your spread, and each weapon also changes when you activate the overdrive, which is when the game gets, for one, gets a lot more colorful. Like they put like this really bright and like very pink filter over the game, and like
they love pink in that game.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very colorful like post-apocalyptic game, which again just shows like how much of a difference it was from this game is from the original game, which is a very much
one color. It was like brown. It was basically shades of brown and gray.
Yeah. But it was just really exciting getting to actually explore this world, because I feel like that's a common thing to say when you're talking about an open world game. It's really exciting to be able to explore the world, but again, I just keep going back to like thinking back to the original game, which is very like I guess especially in retrospect, very boring, like a very boring open world game. But this one is a very exciting one because there's a lot more personality for a lot of the characters. Your character in particular, Walker, who can actually you can choose either male or female with this character, which is very interesting. And you also interact with these other like very interesting like colorful characters as well.
Lily, you gotta see this place. Even goddamn Ranger Jersey would have treaded with caution here.
Yeah, Jersey died, so you gotta be better than him. Make sure you got the gear and the skills you need before going in.
For me, like just especially thinking back to those old demos, like I feel like I've done sort of like a 180. Like my opinion is like totally changed, which doesn't really happen that often, especially when you sort of preview like games like this where, usually the opinion you have is sort of like maybe grows a bit or it just stays the same. So I'm very much like, interested in seeing like more of this game. So.
I am curious to ask you both about the open world, because when I was playing Rage 2, it was basically just going from point A to point B. Like there was no radio stations to listen to. The side quests I kept running into, like they would all start with the same line of dialogue where it's like this old man would be yelling at these people that they were chasing him, then I would go a bit of more and then it would be the same old man yelling again. So does the game kind of mix that up a little bit more? Like is there life to this open world? Or?
It's hard to say, like, based on what we saw. There are things that happen in the open world. For instance, I was driving around and someone challenged me to a race, so we just did a quick race. I got some experience or whatever. There's a lot of fights going on. Like we'll be driving around, there'll be factions that are fighting each other that you can get involved in. There's also convoys that drive around. But yeah, you look at it and it seems like there is stuff to do in this world. Whether or not you're gonna want to spend a lot of time doing that, I don't know. Like from what we saw, I'd probably mess around with that stuff for the first 5 or 6 hours, and after that I'd be like, all right, let's just run the main quest or the main story, which is also kind of interesting how they're dealing with that, because it's very non-linear in that you're completing different quests for different people, and that moves your, I don't even really know how
your
to describe
status up with like the different factions.
It kind of reminded me of Ghost Recon Wildlands, where you'd like go to this area, complete those missions, and build towards this boss character that you fight. We didn't see enough of it to really say whether or not it's exactly like that or not. But it definitely seems kind of like that, where you can kind of tackle these missions however you'd like. And then I think another interesting thing that they mentioned was that they plan on updating this game pretty regularly.
Tim Willits actually described this game as an evolving, like single-player game. It's not a live service game, and that's something that should be clear. It's not like Destiny or like and you don't need to be online to play the game. You can like clear through all of the content,
It's not co-op either.
No, there's no like multiplayer of any kind.
The world itself will change, right?
Yeah, they described it as like a live events, like being gradually like incorporated into the game. Like say like there's like a roaming like band of bandits like scouring through like certain regions, and you have to go find them or whatever. And they didn't really dive into like I guess when exactly or like what sort of content, but they did say like the game that would be at launch would be very different from the game that's going to be out like maybe a year from now or whatever. So it'll in a lot of ways it seems this game is very different from like what it has done like in the past. It's like a proper open world game now, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is co-developed by Avalanche, which they made Just Cause, and of course they made Mad Max. So obviously they're a perfect fit for this type of like post-apocalyptic open world game. So
yeah, and it is running off the Avalanche's engine too. It's not with id Tech. So that makes sense because you've got this big open world and you need an engine that can handle that. But then also there's a lot of linear missions that feel very much like Doom or
they're either underground or like
id.
in a building, so it's a lot of very narrow hallways and corridors.
Yeah, they actually call them like those missions, like these dungeons, I guess you can say, like direct callbacks to corridor shooters. So
I think that of the time that I play with the game, those moments are my favorite because it allows you to experiment with your powers a lot more. I was a little worried when they announced that this game was going to be single player, because if it's not co-op, like as an easy comparison, Borderlands, then it's harder to mix and match powers because then you have to worry about cooldowns. But when you're in that kind of very narrow space, setting up those awesome combinations is a little bit easier. And so I'm a little bit wary of the very outdoorsy battlefields. And I'm kind of wondering, since you guys both played the later game, how do you manage like distance in the game? Like, does it get easier going forward? Because there were moments where like I just wasn't able to dash far enough, or my powers weren't able to reach far enough, and it slowed the game down a significant portion.
I felt like I was able to keep up with a lot of enemies, like in terms of like just like doing like the parkour or just platforming. Like we had a double jump as well, And
The double jump,
yeah,
and like if you get your combo meter going, you can
Yeah.
just keep spamming your overdrive,
Yeah.
which is what Alessandro did, and he just like what you did it like 5 or 6 times
Oh,
in
yeah.
a row and just slaughtered.
you're just tearing through enemies. Like the combat's like really, it gets like really chunky and gross, and like, but
I say that might have been my detriment because I only had access to the assault rifle, pistol,
Yeah.
and shotgun. So
Yeah.
not the most creative weapons that are in that game. And I've seen the trailers. I'm like, the gravity gun and like the pistol, you can snap your fingers and they explode into fire. Looks so cool.
Yeah, it definitely seems like momentum is good. Like
Yeah.
when you start moving and once you get that momentum rolling, it feels pretty good. But maybe when you start out, it's tough to. There's not as many ways to get that momentum rolling. I don't know. Any closing thoughts on?
yeah,
Rage from Alessandro?
you know, just I feel like I'm just like I was saying earlier, like you know, my opinion of the game has just changed, you know, because it's really I understand that it's really challenging to sort of like you know, sort of demo these like open world games, like, you know, in sort of small doses, like even like spending like an hour or so. Like, you know, I feel like that's not enough time to actually, you know, be able to get a sense of like all the systems, you know, of the game and seeing how they all mingle together. So, you know, but I mean, after spending 2.5 hours, like I was just so impressed with like, you know, the amount of detail, but also just like the amount of like you know, content within the world. Like, you know, it just seems like, you know, there's a little bit of something, like, you know, to do, like when it comes to vehicles, like, you know, participating in races or, you know, actually clearing out bases, like, you know, with the enemies, like gangs or whatever. So,
So I'm still a little bit wary about it, but what you both have said today has made me look at the game a little bit better. So I'm looking forward to it a little bit more. Kind of repeating what Alessandro said, I think the humor is one of the best things that Rage 2 has going for it, and I completely understand that now with Borderlands 3 coming out this year, Rage 2 has direct competition, but Rage 2 just seems to be embodying a completely different style of humor, and I really want to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will like it. I don't think it'll necessarily blow people away from what we played. That could obviously change because it does seem like you have a map and you're kind of just checking things off, which is meditative and great, and in like the combat itself is a lot of fun from what I played.
yeah.
But yeah, as someone who wasn't really looking forward to it much after playing this demo, I'm pretty excited to play Rage 2.